Hello, this is part 2 in an ongoing series covering the top 100 English language comics of the 20th century as selected by the critics for the Comics Journal in issue number 210, February 1999. My zine Canon, we devoted an entire issue to analyzing this issue and that list, featuring interviews with the surviving list makers and just a bunch of analysis of the list itself and what has happened with those books and those cartoonists since. If you're interested in this, canonzine.bigcartel.com. There's a link in the description. But otherwise, we'll jump into it. This is part 2, so we'll be covering the second 10th of the list. And we're going to kick that off with number 90, Mr. Punch by Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean. At this time, Neil Gaiman would obviously have been best known for Sandman, but Sandman did not make the list. This is Neil Gaiman's only appearance on the top 100. Kind of an odd pick to me. Not to say it's a bad book, but kind of surprising. I don't really feel like it's top tier Dave McKean either, but clearly the voters on this list disagreed. Dave McKean appears further down the list, or I guess further up the list, depending on your point of view. But yeah, like I said, this is the only Neil Gaiman. This was from 1994, which makes it, there's several things from the 90s on here, so it's not the most recent, but fairly recent considering. But yeah, so it's a good book. Modern revelations about Gaiman aside, he was clearly a big name at the time, but that name didn't really help him with the list too much. At number 89, the autobiographical comics of Spain Rodriguez. At the time of the list, it was 1974 to present. They were considering that. I think most of this stuff probably appeared in the late 60s, early 70s. This is an older collection from Fantagraphics called My True Story. In recent years, they have been collecting Spain's work over a 5-volume set. They've put out 3 of those books so far. All highly recommended. I'm a big Spain fan. And this is the stuff I like the most of his, to be honest. Yeah, these are autobiographical stories about being young. I believe he grew up in Buffalo, New York. He was a member of a motorcycle gang, and so there's lots of just fighting and getting into trouble. Then later on, he gets a little more active politically. Here's a story, Chicago 68. It's pretty great. You see all the activists getting the shit beaten out of them by the cops. So, yeah, he's a hell of a good cartoonist. Really unique. No one else is really like Spain. But I love his autobio stuff. I could read 1,000 pages of these biker stories. It's a real shame there are so few of them. At number 88, The Fourth World of Jack Kirby. The Fourth World consisted of 4 different series: New Gods, The Forever People, Mr. Miracle, and Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, as you can see right here. And ran for not very long. I think his run on Mr. Miracle ended up being the longest. But yeah, 1970 to 74 is what the journal considers the timeline. These collections, it's a 4-volume set. I think this is the best reprinting of this material ever. It's on this nice kind of newsprinty paper. The colors look fantastic. Everything looks so clean and bright, but doesn't have the glare of slick paper. It's probably more available in it's a giant omnibus. I bet you can find that for an affordable price. But anyway, these are really fun comics. Obviously, people's opinions on Kirby vary, and which Kirby they like more or less, varies. I'll be honest, I probably enjoy the Marvel Age stuff the most, but I do think this is probably the pinnacle of his work. Anyway, good stuff. Not the last time he'll appear on the list. At number 87, the New Yorker cartoons of George Price. There's probably quite a few George Price collections out there in used bookstores. This is a nice little overview, a 55-year retrospective. He was a cartoonist for the New Yorker from 1926 to 1995, which is pretty insane. As you can see from his style, he has this nice clear line style, kind of very flat lines. I love his expressions on his characters, and I just find the art very appealing. And some of the New Yorker cartoonists, I mean, they really vary in terms of their tone. There will be a few more appearing down the list, but he's a pleaser. I mean, I think, if people think New Yorker cartoons at one point were snooty, they'd probably really enjoy George Price. They're very accessible, really precursors to the one-panel cartoons that would come to dominate newspapers in the second half of the 20th century, especially the last quarter century, I think. Anyway, I like his cartooning, very smooth. Don't know that I would have him on a top 100 list, but I really enjoy his work. At number 86, Stuck Rubber Baby by Howard Cruz. This first appeared in the 90s, I believe. Let's find out. This is not an original printing. This is a recent printing by First Second. And of course, it's not going to tell me when exactly it came out. 95. Sorry, I guess the Comics Journal has the information right there. I can look and see. Anyway, this is the largest edition so far of this work. His original pages are enormous and gorgeous, and I really would have loved to have seen a larger format of this book, but I'm happy that they put this out at least. It's so easy when the art is shrunk down to lose his stippling effects he uses everywhere. Cruz is just an incredible cartoonist, one of the greats, and this is his only big book, his only big graphic novel, and it's a stunning piece of work. I think it was a little too early. I think if this had come out 10 years later, 15 years later, this would have been, it had the potential to be a smash hit and be very successful. I don't think it was particularly successful before. So, but it has managed to keep getting reprinted, which is great. Highly recommend this work. Deals with civil rights, coming to terms with his homosexuality, the 60s. Really great work. The pinnacle of his career. At number 85, the Willie and Joe cartoons from the World War II era by Bill Malden. There are more of these from when they go back home after the war. This edition is by Fantagraphics. They also published a collection of the post-World War II stuff, which is great too. But this is where Bill Malden's legacy was really built. Here you get the sort of pre-Willie and Joe stuff as he sort of develops the style. And, he the world weariness begins to seep in at a certain point. Really lovely cartooning, really good stuff. You know, Bill Malden was in Europe making these cartoons, hanging out with GIs. So that's a classic Willie and Joe right there. Just looks great. They have full beards, disheveled, not glorifying war in any way. Really good stuff. Malden went on to be a editorial cartoonist in the 50s. I think he ruffled feathers. He was probably a little further left than post-war America was really happy with. I believe this collection's out of print. I have no idea what it goes for, but there are other Bill Malden books you can find from used bookstores or just online sellers for probably pretty cheap. Really wonderful cartoonist, important cartoonist. At number 84, Why I Hate Saturn by Kyle Baker. This is, I think, probably a first printing from Piranha Press, 1990. It's been, I don't know if it's currently in print, but DC for some time had lots of the Kyle Baker stuff in print. Not sure if he's keeping it in print himself. You can find Kyle Baker on Amazon, where he's still putting out self-published work. As you can see, Why I Hate Saturn has this sort of picture book style panels and then dialogue below it. These aren't captions, it's dialogue. I'm a big fan of Baker's work, and I think this is his best book. This is his funniest book, in my opinion. Dialogue is great. It's really sharp. Baker's another one who I think, if the right audience could find him, he could be hugely successful. But it's so hard to find sort of regular people to buy comics. And regular people are who this sort of thing would appeal to. Very just sort of smart, hip, funny, dialogue-driven work. Very kind of New York, you know. Anyway, wonderful book. This one's not hard to find at all. At number 83, another book that is not at all hard to find. V for Vendetta by Alan Moore and David Lloyd. They started it in the early 80s for Warrior Magazine in England. And then a few years later, they wrapped it up for DC, who reprinted the whole thing, put it into a book, and of course it has stayed in print ever since, keeping the rights away from Alan Moore and David Lloyd. This is beautiful, beautiful work. Is there a colorist on this thing? Or is David Lloyd doing it himself? I can't remember. Yeah, not sure. Either way, David Lloyd's art on this stuff is superb. Perfect pairing between writer and artist. It's a great book. Probably even more relevant now than it was in the 80s. Unfortunately, some of Alan Moore's best writing. And I think it really holds up as a great, great comic. Much like with Watchmen, I can't imagine someone would be watching this video that isn't aware of this book, and most have probably read it. But if you haven't, check it out. It's one of Moore's best books, which is really saying something. Fantastic book. At number 82, Caricature by Daniel Clowes. They don't mean the whole book. This is a collection of stories. I believe at least some version of this book is still in print. But what made the list is the short story Caricature itself, which I believe is 16 pages. I'll just thumb through it. I forget which issue of 8-Ball this appeared in, somewhere in the middle. And his artwork has really come together at this point. Obviously, he's continued to be a cartoonist for 30 more years, so there's lots of stuff that's changed, and evolved, but he's grown out of his younger phase that he had on Lloyd Llewellyn in the early issues of 8-Ball. He's now fully formed as a cartoonist, and he really becomes a brilliant short story writer over the course of a certain run of 8-Ball. And then, of course, at that point, he goes to just making graphic novels, which is too bad. I like the graphic novels, but of course I would love a collection of short stories. I do think he's one of the best at it in comics history. So, there you go. And at number 81, the last one for this video, Daddy's Girl, comics by Debbie Dreschler. This one might be a hard one to show. The content of this is very troubling, so I might kind of thumb through kind of quick on the video. This is the original book published by Fantagraphics. It was republished, I can't remember exactly when, around the turn of the century. She did another book called Nowhere that was published by Drawn and Quarterly, and that was collected into a nice big hardcover. And as far as I know, that's it for her work. 2 sort of classic books, all featuring her character Lily, which is, I don't know whether it's actually autobiography or not. It sure reads like it is, but you know, that's a troublesome thing. As you can see, lots of ink on these pages. She's practically scraping away the white from the black. Just heavy pages. Really expressive characters. And as I said, just very, very troubling content. Concerns incest. Makes it kind of a hard read, but these are fantastic comics. Just some of the best comics ever made. Yeah, she's a hell of a writer, and her style looks great too. Really good stuff. Okay, that's it for the second one. We'll be back for the third part covering this issue. Once again, if you're interested in a closer look at this original issue, the CANON Annual 2024, available at canonzine.bigcartel.com. It's got all you'd ever want to know about this issue, and, well, frankly, probably a lot more than you'd ever want to know. All right, thank you.